Good evening, everyone. I welcome the guests and the press to the Council meeting and remind you that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to Council's Facebook and YouTube pages. I would ask everyone to please turn all mobile phones to silent mode, and please be aware that a hearing loop is available in the Council chamber. Staff members are able to assist you with this at any time during the meeting. Please remain quiet in the gallery so that everyone can hear the meeting. Anyone disrupting the meeting may be asked to leave. I would also like to remind members of the public watching the live stream that a copy of the agenda and information explaining Council meetings can be found on the Council website. Tonight you will see that we have 9 reports in open Council and we also have 1 in closed Council, a transparency rate of 90%. Please stand as I call upon Pastor Julie Olsen to read the prayer, the Christian prayer. Thank you.
Gracious God, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, guiding us so that the decisions we make might truly be for the well-being of the people of the city of Casey. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Olsen. Could I also ask you to remain standing as I call upon Mia Sivarasa from the Casey Multi-Faith Network to read the faith statement.
Casey Multi-Faith Network exists to promote peace, harmony and understanding, and to do so in partnership with Casey Council and the wider Casey community. We aim to spread knowledge and clarity about what different religions and worldviewers believe, teach and practice. We believe that all members of religions and faiths have the right to peacefully practice and celebrate their own religion in a shared attitude of friendly coexistence and cooperation with all other peoples.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. The City of Casey acknowledges that we're on the traditional land of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people and pay respects to all elders past and present. Call for apologies. Are there any apologies this evening? I have an apology for Councillor Susan Saray. I'm just going to ask for a mover and a seconder to grant leave of absence for Councillor Saray from 12th of November 2018. So moved by Councillor Gillich and seconded by Councillor Cristani. Is there any dissent? No, just for today only. Sorry, I beg your pardon. If we can, yep. Yeah, 4. Yeah, instead of from. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Aziz. Oh, how come, who's written? Sorry, I am so sorry. Who put that there? 8th of November, thank you. Should have checked my phone. Oh. Okay, so that was moved by Councillor Gillich, seconded by Councillor Cristani. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. I'm now looking for a mover and a seconder to call a suspension of local law. Mover? Yeah, Councillor Smith. Seconder, Councillor Aziz. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent. Local law has been suspended. And I would like to start, there are a number of items tonight, but I'd like to start by acknowledging our neighbouring mayor, Councillor Colin Ross. Councillor Colin Ross is with us tonight. He had dinner. We actually had photos together in our joint robes, which was just fantastic. Councillor Ross, you've served your city very well, and you've also been a great friend of Casey. I know you've worked so well with Mayor Emeritus Councillor Ablett, done a great deal of work, but even as a councillor for your 11 years, we got to enjoy our presentation at the MAV together for our 10-year service. So you've been on council for 11 years, and we'd like to acknowledge you and to thank you so much for all that you've done and to wish you well into the future. So. And in our meeting before council, I did say that you were going to be here for an hour, and because we've got such a short agenda, Councillor Smith did add, well, you might be here on your own because we might have already gone, but we wouldn't leave you behind. But please, if you can stay for the meeting, that'd be fantastic. Now I'd like to hand over to Councillor Rosario, who has a couple of items to mention. No. So, Councillor Rosario, please, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I rise tonight to just raise a concert that's coming up here at Bunjil Place called You're the Voice. And this is this concert, the theme is singing out against family violence. So I'm just going to read a bit about it. It's be very quick. And I'll explain to you why it's significant. You're the Voice is a groundbreaking new project created in collaboration with Play It Forward under the artistic direction of Dr. Jonathan Welsh AM to raise awareness around family violence in the Casey community. The project includes a series of workshops that culminate in this joyful concert. It aims to inspire participants to stretch their minds and explore their creativity through the spirit of community singing. It promises that audiences will be left empowered and inspired by the performance. The reason why I raised this tonight, Madam Mayor, is that I was at the launch of You're the Voice, and it's actually inspired by John Farnham, who I believe launched a similar program up in Queensland. But there is a strong message behind it, which is educating the community and running some workshops as well through what's being raised to help raise awareness about family violence and ways we can get around that. So Dr. Jonathan Welsh is very passionate about that, and I did promise the group that I would raise that tonight. So the concert is here at Bunjil Place Theatre on Sunday, 25th of November at 3 p.m. Tickets for adults are $15, concessions are $10, and $5 for students. Madam Mayor, that's a pretty good deal to get into a world-class theatre to be able to enjoy such an amazing performance. And as the councillors who were here the night of the mayoral drought relief concert may remember, the voices of Casey Choir actually sang You're the Voice and another song as well. And it was really great to kick off the event. And that's just a snapshot of what's to come, Madam Mayor.
Fantastic.
So highly encourage the community, get out there and support
it. How do
it.
they book their tickets?
I can do that through Bunjil Place
Yep.
website. And that will be taken care of from there, and it's going to be a great night. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Fantastic. And Councillor Rosario, you've got one other item, or do you have two? One, no.
Well, no. The only other thing I was going to say was yesterday was Diwali, and under the in the Indian calendar, that's a special event. And I just wanted to wish our Indian community a happy Diwali, and may joy and blessing be upon them all. Thank you.
We all join you in that. That's fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Rosario. Councillor Flannery, you had an item to raise, didn't you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just an awareness that this week being the week of armistice, down at Casey Central, the Providence Artists Group was granted a grant of $28,000 from the Honourable Anthony Byrne, MP, a federal Member of Parliament, and is sitting member in Holt in our local area. Now, the Providence Artists Group have went out there and with Kelvin Bell and asked the local artists to paint what they thought over the last 100 years of what they considered to be worthwhile paintings to put up as a display in the shopping centre for everybody to go and have a look at. Kelvin got all local artists from around City of Casey to go down there and paint. The paintings are absolutely marvellous, and you know, it'll pull at your heartstrings, and I recommend that anybody in the City of Casey and out of City of Casey go there and visit the Casey Central Shopping Centre. I take my hat off to the Casey Central Shopping Centre because they've donated all the open space down there. It's outside Woolworths, and it's well worth going down and having a look at, especially in the 100-year of armistice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flannery. Something really worthwhile going to have a look at. I'd now like to call on Councillor Rosario, unless there were any other items. Were there any other items? No? Sorry? No, you go first. Thank you. Councillor Rosario, we've got two very sad announcements to make, which will be followed by a 1-minute silence in recognition of two lives very well lived. And I'll hand over to Councillor Rosario for the first one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is with great sadness that I do announce the passing of Peter Carter. For those who knew Peter Carter was one of the founding members of the Casey's Conservation Advisory Committee, Madam Mayor, and during your time on the committee, you would have worked with Peter as well, as would a number of us. Obviously, that committee was started in the time of Mick Moreland, so there's a number of original committee members still around. But we received the sad news last week that Peter did pass away, and Peter was a man full of life. So he was. There's even a picture of him on a bike at his age, still riding a bike, which puts me to shame because I don't ride a bike the way that he does. So he keeps fit. But Peter had a very strong passion for the environment and animals as well. So his work history and his volunteerism in the community had a lot of that in it. And just wanted to mention a few of the things that he's done. He was a volunteer for Landcare, Red Cross Emergency Communications at fires and floods. He was also, as I've already mentioned, a Conservation Advisory Committee member for nearly 20 years, Madam Mayor, and he only gave it up a few years back to pursue some other interests after 20 years of service. So we very much supported him in that. And he was even a tutor at U3A in computers. So that was terrific for him to give back so much. I know that the council as well has a lot of respect in council officers because of his 20 years of service as a volunteer. Many people in this council has actually worked with Peter. And what I might do is tonight, and maybe the voice of the council officers could be in the form of Miss Nicola Ward. Perhaps you could just shed a bit more light on Peter's contributions over the last 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rosario. Ms Ward.
Thank you, Councillor Rosario. Yeah, very briefly, we just wanted to put the council officers would like to express on the record their sadness at the passing of Peter Carter. He's been a great mentor for many of us, and we're very sad to hear of his passing. He was a phenomenal member of the community. He's really the sort of person you look up to in terms of, you know, how you want to live your life. And many of the council officers were very sad to hear that he'd passed, and we just wanted to register our condolences to his family.
That's lovely of you. Thank you, Ms Ward. You're right with that, Councillor Rosario. On behalf of the council, we all express our great sadness for the loss and a loss of a life so well lived. What a wonderful man, and we will be acknowledging him and his family very shortly. There were two passings that were quite significant last week, and the other one was Elizabeth, better known as Betty Clydesdale. First and foremost, she was our 2012 Senior Citizen of the Year, and there's a photo of her here at her best. She was a cheeky individual, so wonderful, and such a trailblazer. When I first met Betty, it was before I joined council. She used to run a computer class in the back of her house that we used to gather around, and she was into Apple Mac on a grand scale, and then everything else that came of Apple, it was Apple only, and there were some absolutely amazing people that were there, past lecturers, professors, wonderful people that used to join that, so learning all about Apple products. What she couldn't do on an Apple computer just wasn't worth doing. So it expanded into videos, and following her nephew from memory, who was doing a bike ride around one of the Asian Pacific countries, and she was following him on her computer, and way ahead of her time. She could make computers do things that normally weren't able to be done. But once I got to know Betty more in a councillor capacity, once I joined council, she told me about the fact that she was the one that started a petition for the Cranbourne bypass. That was over 40 years ago. She was knocking on doors, trying to get signatures, and that's why there is now a provision for a bypass called the Jagga bypass on the map, but we still don't have our bypass. And the day that we do secure our Cranbourne bypass, which is what all the community need, Councillor Rowe would know that from his days in Parliament as well as on council, it will be one of those times when I'd love to acknowledge Betty at that point. Betty also was part of a team who lobbied very hard and fundraised to build the old pool in Grant Street in Cranbourne. And then when the warm water pool was established at Casey Ray, she made sure that the arthritis group, who were very prominent in the older pool, got front and centre there as well. She was always looking out for other people. She was always trying to help, and she was one of the most outstanding family members. Absolutely loved her children and loved her grandchildren and now her great-grandchildren. I attended Betty's funeral last week, and I was very fortunate to sit beside Robin Zeddens. So that was great comfort for me, because I just felt so very sad to say goodbye to Betty. But to hear the stories, we were in hysterics. They were very funny about her competitiveness, how she used to she used to be able to play games with her grandchildren, and then she'd find ways to trick them so that she always won, and that was important to Betty. But how much she loved her family and how much she made provision for them. The other person she absolutely adored was her husband, Greg, who passed away prematurely from cancer, which was so sad. And Greg was a Shire engineer. He worked for the Shire of Cranbourne, and he was so dedicated. I heard he never had a day's sick leave. And I often heard Betty talk about, and something that they mentioned at a funeral, that she would have his meal ready for him at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then again at 6. He'd come home, have his meal, and go back to the Shire to finish the work that he had to do. He was so dedicated, and that dedication was recognised by the naming of Greg Clydesdale Square. It's named after him. I adored Betty personally, and I know so many others, when she was our Senior Citizen of the Year here on council, felt the same way. And I think Councillor Aziz certainly want to say a few words, but I'm open to anyone that wants to speak about Betty Clydesdale, because that would be very meaningful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and I rise to support and acknowledge everything you have said in memory of this wonderful lady. I had the absolute honour and pleasure of serving with her when I was Mayor of Casey for the first time in 2012. She was our Senior Citizen of the Year then, and she was an absolute delight to work with, and definitely someone that I learnt a lot from in terms of her dedication and where her heart was in relation to this community, particularly coming from a family, as you have acknowledged, with such a strong heritage of community service. Her alongside her husband, who had a formal administrative role with the City of Cranbourne. So she was an amazingly wonderful lady, not one to be told. I remember she had quite a strong personality and a forthright demeanour about her, but just the kindest heart and the most engaged ethos and outlook on this community. It's a very, very sad loss for the City of Casey, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aziz. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a past councillor of the Shire of Cranbourne and the past member for the state seat of Cranbourne, I had a special relationship with Betty and her friends, and I often think of them, and that always brings a smile to my face, because I can imagine these ladies when they were girls growing up, and they all grew up together, and some of the stories that they would tell and whisper amongst themselves, and then break into titters of laughter and great glee on their face about the memories of old-style Cranbourne and when Cranbourne was founded. Greg certainly was a long-serving Shire engineer, and a lot of what is Cranbourne today, and that is the layout of the roads and the like, was because of Greg Clydesdale. And I remember when I was the member for Cranbourne, there was a pool of money came out to do with amalgamation of municipalities, and it was joining of municipalities. And I was walking down the street to get my lunch, and Betty comes up beside me. Gary, oh, hey Betty, how are you? She, good. You know Cameron Street? I said, yes, Betty. And she said, it's not made. I said, no, Betty, I've been working on it for a while. She said, there's this new lot of money, and I think it's about time it got made. Well, we put the application in, and with the support of the municipality, we got the funding, and there was a photograph of me on the grader driving it. But yeah, that was what she was. If she wanted something, the swimming pool, as you mentioned, was something very dear to her and Ray Wentworth's heart, along with Joan Reid. And Joan Reid was a doyen of the community. And all of them, thankfully, were great supporters of mine, for which I'm very, very grateful for their support over the 12 years that, or 10 years I was in Parliament, and 3 years that I was in council before that. You always knew if you wanted to get to the crux of any problem, you'd go and knock on Betty's door, or you'd knock on Joan's door or Ray's door, and you'd say, Ray, what really happened here? He said, oh, I can't tell you what really happened, but this was the upshot of it all. And they had all these little secrets they used to keep. And they were beautiful, beautiful people. And they were, in fact, you know, many of you will hear when I talk about Cranbourne, and Cranbourne being the heart of the municipality, and how the old Cranbourne is something that we don't want to lose. And people like Betty and her ilk are the ones that kept that heart and soul of the community growing together, and they welcomed everybody that came into the municipality, took them into their clubs and into the senior citizens, and helped them look after themselves and take round the scones and things to welcome them, and welcome them into their churches, as Joan did at the Church of England, and Betty as well. It was just such a great community with those people, and it's a sad, sad day that she passed. I'm sorry that I wasn't aware that she had actually passed until today. That's, you know, it was a shock to hear she'd passed, because I'd only heard recently she'd just moved to Malvern, I think, to be closer to her family.
Year and a half ago.
From Blue Hills, and yes, a sad day of passing, but a wonderful, wonderful life. A life of a group of people that are passing from within us, but certainly made the heart and soul of what is Australia today.
I agree, and what an example for all of us. She was made of great stuff, and a great loss to Cranbourne Rotary, Inner Wheel, and to her family. Is there anybody else that would like to make some comments? That being the case, could I please ask that we all rise and have 1 minute's silence in memory of Peter Carter and Betty Clydesdale. Thank you very much. Please be seated. I now determine that the local law be reapplied and move on to the confirmation of minutes. Is there a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday the 16th of October? Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Gillich. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. I'm now looking for a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of a special council meeting held on Monday 29th of October. Councillor Rose moved it, Councillor Rosario seconded it. Is there any dissent? That being the case, that is carried. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest or personal interest that they wish to declare? I would like to start by just stating that I do have a conflict of interest that I have made known to the CEO earlier today, and that's with item 6.9. And Councillor Ablett?
Sorry. Through you, Madam Mayor, the same item 6.9, direct conflict, which I've relayed to the CEO earlier this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Councillor Abbott. And if we could just both of us mention that at the time that report comes up, that would be fantastic. Officers' reports. Are there any items councillors wish to withdraw on officers' reports? So, Councillor Aziz.
6.3, Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. 6.2 or 6.3?
6.2, sorry, yep.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay. 6.9. Thank you, Councillor Rose. 6.9. And Councillor Pristani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 14.1 in closed council, please. That's 14.1. Thanks.
14.1. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, is there a mover and seconder to adopt the recommendations listed in the officers' reports for reports number 6.1, 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, 6.6, 6.7, 6.8? So a mover, thank you, Councillor Gillich. Moved by Councillor Gillich, seconded by Councillor Rowe. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. Public question time. I don't believe we have any questions. Is that right, Ms Frost? Yep. Okay, so there will, given that we don't have any questions, there won't be any public question time. We'll now move on to officers' reports withdrawn for discussion, and I'll start with item 6.2. Councillor Aziz.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move this recommendation in my name, but with an additional point, and that is that Council write to the Honourable Alan Tudge, Federal Minister for Cities, Urban Infrastructure and Population, to request that the City of Casey be included on the federal government's dashboard for smart cities. I'll just leave it at that and leave it to the crafting talents of the officers to write the letter along with the supporting evidence.
Well, that's moved by Councillor Aziz. Could we have a seconder? That seconded by Councillor Jackson.
And Madam Mayor, before I go on to debate this, and this is a significant milestone for the future of the City of Casey in terms of adopting this great blueprint tonight, which the officers have capably drafted, but also of including ourselves amongst a set of Australian cities that are embarking on a very, very strong journey to become smart cities. And yesterday I had the pleasure of a discussion with our manager of smart cities, Mr. Alsop, and I went through him on a journey of discovering this website, which really blew me away. Because it focuses on a number of cities around Australia. I think there's about 19 of them. And that focus is on what they call key capabilities and then measures below each capability to determine whether or not a city is progressing towards or on its journey towards a smart city. And I've asked Holly to actually bring it up on the screen before you. That's what the website actually looks like. And as you can see at the top, the key headings are jobs and skills, housing, infrastructure, livability, innovation and planning. And under each one of those, there is a set of key measures. And just to give you an example, under livability, perhaps if we click on that, and then it should ask you if you want to see all 4 measures. If you go down a little bit. See how it says view for all 4 charts on the right at the top there, yep. So just by way of summary, I'm not sure if we're in the right area, but I'll give you the measures under livability anyway, because we aspire to be Australia's most livable city through our council plan. So it talks about things like life expectancy at birth. People born today, you know, how long their lives are expected to last. It talks about share of households in the lowest income quintile to measure the rate of poverty in a city. It talks about an index of relative socio-economic disadvantage. That's a separate measure by itself. And languages other than English spoken at home. That's all under livability. If you go to jobs and skills, which is one close to my heart, it talks about the goods sector share of the employment market in the city. It talks about the market services sector share and also the non-market services sector, and it provides definitions for what each one of these sectors are. And if you go to infrastructure and investment, another favourite one of mine, Madam Mayor, it talks about jobs accessible by car within 30 minutes in the city. It talks about the proportion of journeys to work by public transport or by active transport, meaning by bike or on foot. And it also talks about peak travel delay, which is an interesting metric that is obtained from the TomTom navigation application. So the sources of a lot of this data is basically the Australian Bureau of Statistics, but many of the sources are also other credible organisations like TomTom, but also LinkedIn in terms of how connected professionals are within their city, outside their city, and indeed throughout the world. Just quickly, Madam Mayor, on innovation, it talks about new business entry rates into your city. It talks about households that actually have broadbands. That's a separate measure on its own. Patent applications, there's an interesting one because it's a sign of ingenuity and innovation. How many patent applications are generated per 100,000 members of the population? How many trademark applications are generated? How many workers are actually working in the knowledge-intensive services, and so on and so on. The beauty about this website is that a lot of the data collection and a lot of the measures against other cities actually occurs at the federal level. And so our staff and us as a council, as decision makers on these matters, would actually get benefit of that data through the collection efforts of someone else other than our hard-working staff who are doing many, many other meaningful pieces of work in the smart city space. And so you can see on the left-hand side all the cities that are members. There is a number of Victorian cities, including Ballarat and Bendigo, but there's also other main cities around Australia. Some of these cities, Councillor Tim Jackson and I visited when we did our study tour around Australia looking at smart cities and what's happening. And of course our capital city, Melbourne, is part of that important set. We believe that the city of Casey should be on there. We are Victoria's largest city by population. We are probably now one of the fastest, or certainly the fastest growing residential corridor in Australia. And as I keep saying, the decisions we make affect more Victorians than any other council in the state. So we should be on it. And that's the purpose of writing to the federal government. It's an underpinning strategy to all the other great work that's been done and that's already mentioned in the report. The report speaks for itself, so I won't need to go into that, Madam Mayor. But this is another amazing leap forward into the future, transforming Casey in under 2 decades into a smart city and into Australia's most livable city as a result. I thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aziz. And could I just say congratulations to you, Mr. Alsop, for this great discovery and what a great inclusion into the strategy that we already have before us. That recommendation, so we've got a mover, which was Councillor Aziz. Sorry, who was Councillor Jackson? Sorry. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. And we're moving straight down to item 6.9, and I'll be declaring a conflict of interest with that. I'd like to move that for a temporary chair, please.
I nominate Councillor Cristani as Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, that's all right. We just discussed it in pre-council.
You okay with that, Councillor? Yeah, great. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
move Councillor Cristani. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Jackson, thank you very much. Is there any dissent?
I just need to move my conflict as well,
Yeah,
for
of course.
direct conflict for reasons I sent to the CEO this afternoon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So I was coming to that. Thank you, Councillor Ablett. And I too would like to declare a conflict of interest. It's an indirect that I did declare to our CEO earlier on. So Councillor Ablett and I will vacate the chamber and we'll come back in once this matter has been addressed.
as I do, I'd like to move a no confidence with Natalie.
Not surprised. Thank you. We ready to go? Okay, I might just take the notes. Yeah, 6.9. Okay, thank you, Councillor Ziz. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy Mayor. Not acting deputy, but actually deputy. I'd like to move this motion in my name.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Rowe, seconded by Councillor Flannery.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very quickly, as I move the recommendation that the report be noted, I'd like to pay my thanks to the officers for an absolutely totally complete report. I don't think anybody could ask for a better synopsis of what's occurred in this particular rezoning application, and it certainly does, no one can read it and not come out knowing everything that happened. And thank you, Ms Wood, for the report by you and your staff. They've done an absolutely great job, and I move that the report be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Do we have any dissent? Any discussion? Well, that is carried. Thank you. We'll call the Mayor. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll move on to consideration of reports of committees. Is there a mover and a seconder to receive and note the record of Assembly of Councillors as listed? As listed in your report. Is it a mover, please? Councillor Jackson, and seconded by Councillor Gillich. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that's carried. Now, is there a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes of the Audit and Ethics Committee meeting held on Tuesday the 28th of August? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Flannery, seconded by somebody on the... No, Councillor Gillich, thank you very much. There being no dissent, that is carried. Petitions. Are there any petitions or joint letters that councillors wish to present? We'll move on to notices of motion, which there are none, so we won't be raising any of those. And there are also no reports for council delegates. Items of urgent business. Are there any items of urgent business that councillors wish to raise tonight? Nope. Okay. Very quick meeting. Well, that ends the first council meeting. Thank you for being so gentle with me. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. Can I please get a mover and a seconder to move that council resolve itself into closed council and resume after a 5-minute adjournment? Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Rosario. Is there any dissent? There being no dissent, that is carried. Thank you everyone who attended tonight, particularly our Mayor from Cardinia. Thank you so much, Colin, for being here. And we'll come back and have our in-camera meeting. And for the rest, thank you very much for attending.